You heard the latest report on the coronavirus numbers here in the region. Provincially, the increase from day to day was about 1.5%. So that's 3 consecutive days that the percentage increase in cases has been below 2%. Remember, we started just a couple of weeks ago talking about how it was 5 and 6% a day. Now it's 1.5%. So it's still 300 cases, which is not insignificant. But it is moving towards the right direction, because if you want to get to 0, you got to go through the ones first. Simple mathematics in some cases. So it's something I think that we need to mention that in some ways, because you have to get the sense that you're getting somewhere, right? Because sometimes it feels like you're not getting anywhere. You're just kind of running in the mud, and here we are, and we've done all this, and the cases are still going up, but the rate of increase is actually dropping, and that is good news. What else would be good news if we didn't have to talk about that stuff all the time? But that is not going away anytime soon. However, some people are going back to work, and that might be somewhat difficult. Frank Newman is with Newman Human Resources right here in Kitchener-Waterloo. Good afternoon, Frank.
How are you doing today, Brian?
Not so bad. A million different things to think about as people might head back to work. And as I was just sitting here, because I'm one of the few in the crowd here in the building these days, there's not too many of us who are left, that even for people who have been working from the office, those rare few, there will be adjustments when people come back to the office, won't there?
Absolutely, and in fact, it may be scarier for you than for the people coming back, because you've been safely ensconced there with security and so on. And as we think about people coming back, there's basically 4 things we want to be able to do. We want to make sure they feel safe, they want to feel secure. You also want to be confident that they can do the right things in the environment. And then finally, if we can do all that, they're going to be productive. And ultimately, we all want to feel productive and earn a living in a safe manner.
So for employers, who maybe are planning on reopening their space, and we know those are few and far between these days, but we know that it's happening, they need to make whatever physical changes are necessary and get probably expert advice on that, right?
Exactly, yeah. And we know that, there are expectations that employees have as people are coming back to work. People, first of all, are going to expect, for example, the office will be better cleaned. They're going to expect to have fewer in-person meetings. They're going to expect the office layout might be changed. For example, I've seen offices change from private offices to vast open areas with scores of desks. How safe are people going to feel in those? So there's going to be a lot of physical and mental change that we have to make in the workplace.
I would like to think that no one will think this way, but someone might, that just by getting to the point of reopening, that everything's going to go back in their office the way that it was. It just can't, can it?
No, I think, as I was thinking about this, it's almost like planning for the astronauts' return from space. They've been in a safe, cocooned environment. They plummet to Earth, and somehow they're exposed to all kinds of things. And so companies need to take some time now to think very carefully about how are they going to introduce people back into the workplace. Are they going to have staggered schedules? Are they perhaps going to have some people come in alternate days just to get people acclimatized? So taking a little bit of time to plan and then tell people in advance what's happening so they do feel secure coming into work. So the idea is there's no surprises.
In the paper that you sent out, you talk about learning lessons from all of this, and I think a lot of times when I've talked about that, Frank, I've talked about maybe there's a new way for this business to do business and take advantage of this kind of situation, but you raise a really interesting point that we need to learn from this just in case it happens again.
Well, we've never seen anything like this before. The closest event to this is probably World War II, where we had major, calamities around the world. So here we have an opportunity that's involved every single employee in a company. And so to take the time to learn from this and say, okay, what can we do better? And there's questions for management. So what could we have done differently? Did we lay people off appropriately? What will we change? The other question for managers and owners is, how did our culture shape up through this? Did we reflect our values as we went through this? Did we honor our commitments to our employees? And then similarly for the employees, it's worthwhile saying, what was your best and worst experience as we went through this? What have they learned, perhaps, about their work or their colleagues? And get their feedback on what the company could do differently. Because this is a great way to engage people, because we've all been through this common shockwave together. So mining that data is really key for us right now.
And taking some time to review what happened, because I think, as you rightfully pointed out, it happened so quickly. The state of emergency was declared. Next thing you know, places are closed down. Places are scrambling to get people to work from home. And now they come back, and we need to talk about safe work practices and medical policies at work, because they may have changed too. Well,
exactly. Even as simple as, how do you come into the office? Are you required to wear a mask? Will we have as many face-to-face meetings, or will we be doing it across a boardroom table? How are we going to manage the cafeteria? Are you going to feel comfortable putting your chicken pot pie in the microwave? All of those things are completely unknown at this point. There's probably no right answer, and every company is different. Whether you're a restaurant or a retail store, the environments are completely different. And so, taking some time to say, okay, how are we going to manage this is going to be worthwhile.
And maybe taking a little bit of time to deconstruct all the teleconferencing and Zooming that's been going on, and figuring out maybe together what are the best practices, what's the right etiquette, because we've all been thrown into this without a whole lot of training on any of that.
Well, that's right. I mean, we've had, I've worked with companies that have been doing virtual meetings for, 10 or 20 years, and they're experts at this, but many of us, leapt into this, and so we don't know the fact that, if you're going to run a virtual team, you've got to have a regular rhythm to the work. You've got to have regular call-ins. And so there are a lot of best practices. And to be honest, we threw everyone into this together. We didn't give people etiquette in terms of even, having a Zoom meeting and making sure everyone turned off their microphones. So I think there is lessons to be learned that we can capture here, and making sure that people respect those lessons as we move ahead, because, as you said, we can come back to this in 6 months. And if we haven't learned, we've really missed an opportunity.
There's probably a good bit of sense here that businesses, small businesses, and department managers should sit down with employees and talk about the financial realities that COVID-19 has left behind, because I think everybody's going to be insecure about their financial situation for a little while. That's another good discussion to have, right?
Yeah, because, and even just having the one-on-one conversation with staff is important, because we don't know if someone's lost a relative or a family member through this. We don't know if, for example, they're about to default on their mortgage. So taking some time to really understand what's happened to people, because people may not voluntarily naturally. And then the other thing is really to make sure that the business is relatively clear as they can be in terms of what's the future direction. Are we going to continue to, offer, online services? Are we going to have sales reps still dropping in and visiting clients? I know a number of my companies are looking at changing the way they do sales, and having that dialogue with people is going to be important, because people are going to be concerned about what's the livelihood of the company. And may even, is the company going to last for this? Are they going to go into receivership? So if companies want to create a sense of confidence in their employees, being honest and upfront about, future business plans makes a lot of sense right now.
It's going to be a very different work world that people return to, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we're going to see, changes to office structures. We're going to see people, first of all, expecting to work from home more frequently. There's a study by Robert Half that says 85% of Canadians now feel most of their work can be done at home. So how do we put that genie back in the bottle? People will have that expectations. On the other hand, a lot of companies thrive on the fact that their people work collaboratively. They see each other every day. There's a feel when you walk into the office. There's a buzz. And so how are we going to maintain that positive energy, when we've got half the people perhaps not in the office? And that's going to be a real cultural question for companies to figure out and find the best medium to work through that.
Well, and to find, a word that we've heard an awful lot of lately in any discussions about work and life, and that's the word balance. Find that right balance. And it's not really on a corporate basis, it's really on an individual basis, right?
Well, that's right. And to some extent, the word work-life balance isn't even a good term. I mean, because it's never going to be completely balanced. You're going to have times when you're going to be working longer hours or lesser hours. So it's almost fair to say, what's the right rhythm? And from parents' perspective, compared to people that don't have kids, parents are saying now that their work-life balance has improved by 20% during this time, and so that's going to be an important factor as we think about how to keep people engaged, because there'll be an expectation I can work from home. But on the other hand, you've also got the people that work in factories and retail, and they can't work from home. And so you're going to have a bit of a culture here in Canada between the haves and have-nots in terms of those that have that privilege of working from home.
Well, and we were already moving in that direction, right? People were doing more virtual working, to be honest, and we have created kind of a class system here, those who still must be out and those who can comfortably sit in their living room and work.
Yeah, and I think it's going to get worse, and I think it's going to change the way children even look at their education. What type of job do I want to have, and do I want a job that has the freedom to work from home or not? And so that's going to have an impact on longer term decision making for people.
There have been some interesting things that have happened, Frank, and we've seen frontline workers, for example, in grocery stores, get an increase in pay, and we've seen a variety of other things like that. When this is over, and I don't know who gets to decide when is, but are those kinds of incentives difficult to take away?
Anytime you take anything away from someone, whether it's a cookie from a child or $1 from an employee, that's going to be tough. And it'll be very interesting to see whether our society recognizes that we should be paying personal service workers an extra $4 an hour. I think that's going to be hard to sustain for organizations. Although we might just see those increases being passed on to the consumer or the client. But I'm not sure it's going to fundamentally change things. I think things will eventually roll back to the way they were, because we probably can't afford to sustain it. But the other question is, around career choices. Will people avoid going into healthcare careers now, or will they say, no, I really do believe I can be a hero? But at the same time, there's the extreme risk with healthcare as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with nursing enrollment over the next period of time.
Well, and a lot of that may depend on what happens with the path of this pandemic. If it continues to hang on at a low level, that may change the way people feel that they want to drive their career. Exactly.
And I think people will be thinking about, do I want to work in a company that's an essential service or one that's not an essential service? And ultimately, people make career decisions based on their personal passion. But this may make it hard for companies, for example, movie theaters. It may make it harder for them to recruit, or even restaurants, just because people may be concerned if this comes back, they could be one of the first to be unemployed.
There are just so many potential changes. It's actually quite remarkable. Frank, as always, thanks for your time.
Very good. Thank you, Brian. You take care.
Frank Newman from Newman Human Resources talking about welcoming all the exiles. We got a bucket of exiles here, and sooner or later they might come back. Now that the state of emergency has been extended to June the 2nd, I don't expect that's going to happen until at least after June the 2nd. So we will have been sitting here essentially for 2.5 months with really just, as I do the math in my head, maybe 15 people here, not all at one time. Right? Like right now, we have 4 people, 5. We're running 3 radio stations here with 5 people. It's pretty impressive. And I wonder what has happened in the Sun Lifes and the Economical Mutuals and the Manulifes, all those places where I will drive by them once in a while and the parking lots are empty. Is everybody working from home? Is that what happened there? Because that seems like a job that you could kind of work from home. Frank's has raised a really interesting issue that I am looking for somebody to talk to about it who might be a little bit more invested in that side than Frank is. Frank always has some great insights. And that is how this kind of thing could affect the decisions that people make in terms of careers. Now, let's be honest and say that many of the people who were laid off were the ones who were in those service sectors like restaurants and movie theaters. I wonder if movie theaters will come back the way they were at all in this. I know some people much prefer to see the shows on the big screen, but I think we all understand that if the studios can figure out a way to make the same amount of money without having to deal with that, they'd probably be happy to cut out the middleman. So send it to you, and here, if it's your $15, you can have the movie for however many days, 4 days, and you can watch it. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. The number of restaurants who may be around. I look at the little coffee shop across the corner here and wonder when it reopens, will they need to have a space that has 20 tables for 50 or 60 people? Or will they maybe just turn into a little bit of a coffee nook? You did have those 20 tables because people liked to sit out there and have a coffee, but will that change? Under the New World Order here. And all the other things. Actually, William sent me an interesting note about schools and saying if the idea is to go back and socially distance the way they are in Quebec, where they're knocking it down to 15 kids per classroom, well, now all of a sudden you need a pile more space. Do you do that by staggering the classes? So maybe half the students, this would be painful. Half the students go to school from 7:30 till 1:30, the other half go to school from 2 o'clock till 8 o'clock, and you clean in between. Throwing out all possibilities, because the Premier says he will make an announcement sometime in the next few days, actually early next week, which means Tuesday probably, about the future of the school year. And if you open up right now, then you've got to figure out a way to keep everybody socially distant, because that's not changing in the next few weeks. We know that already. And then you got to find a place to put them. I know in Quebec they're using sections of gyms. They're using other sections that may not usually have been used for teaching to spread out the kids a little bit more. And would you have to do the same thing in your workplace? It's bad enough to work in a cubicle. I've already done it. I don't want to do it again. But do you need to put up plexiglass around the cubicle now so it becomes a bigger barrier? I don't know. And because I look at those grocery store workers and say, that is your new life. You will be trapped in the plexiglass cage until you're done. So there's a plus side to being an essential worker, like a grocery store clerk, and that you continue to get paid. There is a downside to it as well. You're still out in the public. Wonder if people will make job decisions based on that. This is Kitchener Today on 570 News.